Tonight we're going to talk about how to be effectively smarter. Now, I'm going to repeat something that I've said on numerous occasions before, and that is what we perceive as somebody being smart, what we perceive as somebody being intelligent is almost always the combination of three factors. Sometimes it's one of three factors, and sometimes it is just a very strong performance in one of those three factors. But actual raw cognitive capacity is most similar to having a large barreled cannon. It's similar to having a bigger gun than the average person. The smarter, more intelligent person has a 50 caliber to the average individual's 38 special, or maybe 22. And so it can be more effective, but it isn't necessarily more effective. Just like a bigger cannon, you need to A, have ammunition for it, and B, you have to aim it in the right place. And the analogical equivalent of ammunition is information and experience. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that credentials are information or experience. They're not. All they are is a proxy that may or may not correctly represent information and experience. Experience is more important than information, but they're both valuable. They're both important. And then the third part, which relates to your ability to actually aim your cognitive capacity, is wisdom. And that's something that tends to develop over time. The reason that even very smart young people often say and do such remarkably stupid things is because even though they've got the high level of cognitive capacity, they have little information, they have no experience, and they have no wisdom. And so when you are missing those things, then you are going to be functionally stupid, even if you happen to have a high level of cognitive capacity. And so, by the same token, what you can do to improve your practical intelligence, the way that people perceive you, is to focus on those two other areas. Your cognitive capacity is what it is. There's very little that you can do about it other than make sure that you've got a reasonable amount of sleep, make sure that you're healthy, make sure that you're not intoxicated or otherwise drug befuddled. But your cognitive capacity is what it is. But you can improve your information, you can improve your experience, and you can most certainly improve your wisdom. I'm always much more impressed with people who are wise than people who have a naturally high level of cognitive capacity. A high level of cognitive capacity is just the luck of the draw. I happen to know, just because of my social milieu, I happen to know a lot of very, very highly intelligent people. There's whereas the average person might only know one or two people with an IQ over 150. I probably know 50, maybe more, because of the way that my life is arranged. As an editor and a writer, I come into contact with a lot of highly intelligent people. I might literally go from dealing with Dr. Christopher Hallpike, the anthropologist, and then talk to Martin Van Creveld, the genius and military historian, and then end up exchanging emails with the brilliant writer John C. Wright. So that means that I'm not impressed just because somebody happens to have a high IQ. Sometimes it seems like about a third of the people that I work with do. Game designers, brilliant programmers, and so forth. But their ability, the different ability of these highly intelligent people to say and do and reach intelligent conclusions is very, very different, because they have different information, they have different experience, and they also have different levels of wisdom. I really enjoy Jesse Lee Peterson because he is, I think, from my observation, he appears to be remarkably wise. I would much rather talk to him than a number of people that are perhaps more cognitively gifted, but lack his wisdom and lack his experience. And so, it's really interesting when you see the difference and you begin to understand the importance of these different elements, and then you can improve your own performance. And so I made a little list of some things that I think might help people be functionally smarter. None of these things are going to, just so you understand, none of these things are going to improve your cognitive capacity. But what they may do is they may help you improve the way that you make use of it, where you aim it. So, first of all, my first point is, do not react to your initial impression of a statement. It's very, very easy to miss something significant, especially if you are looking to find something. You're anticipating something. Or worse, if you're looking to discredit or disqualify the person. Never react on the basis of your initial impression. Think through the underlying assumptions upon which a statement rests. When we talk about things, we are almost always relying on a number of foundational assumptions. And so if you find a statement to be important, or if you find a statement to be inaccurate or incredible, the correct thing to do is think through what the assumptions are that underlie those particular, that statement. Gilliam001 says, good tip. I tend to make a fool of myself when I rush to judgment. That's absolutely normal. When you rush to judgment, when you think you've identified that gotcha, you are almost always going to be at least somewhat wrong. Almost always. My third point is, do not commit the genetic fallacy. It doesn't matter who the source is. Even the most dishonest, most ridiculous seeming source can speak truth. Even the devil can quote scripture. However, and also I should say, the genetic fallacy means that you're dismissing a statement, you're dismissing a piece of information on the basis of the source. Wikipedia literally builds the genetic fallacy into its fundamental structure. Their whole concept of reliable sources is a fixation of the genetic fallacy. Because even a reliable source can be wrong, and even an unreliable source can be correct. So don't dismiss something just because it's coming from an unreliable source. However, always double check. Even the most obvious factual statements that are made by someone that you know to be dishonest, rhetorical, or shamelessly biased. And what I mean by that is you can't believe even the most basic statement once you know somebody is not habitually truthful. You need to check every single fact that they present. I can't tell you how many times I am astonished by the level of dishonesty about very, very easily verified things. If you read Jordanetics, my book on Jordan Peterson, you will be surprised at how many lies Jordan Peterson tells about things that you can easily check for yourself. He lies about Hitler. He lies about the big lie itself. It's amazing. You know, why would anyone lie about something that even a 10-second check of the text will demonstrate to be entirely false? That's crazy. But they do it. And so whenever you see someone who you know to be dishonest or rhetorical, you need to check every single thing they say. Number 4 is a really big one. This one is one of the most important things to check, is read what is there. Don't read for what you imagine is going to be there. Don't read for what you are looking for. And above all, do not read for confirmation. Try to read everything as objectively as you possibly can, whether it's something on your side, whether it's something from the other side, whether it's something neutral, whether it's something that you think might prove your theory, something that might disprove your theory. Read it as objectively as you can, and read only what is there. Do not assume implications, and definitely don't assume motives. You're not a mind reader. If your argument is dependent upon reading someone else's mind, your argument is going to be wrong almost every time. Devin Jump comments, all truth is God's truth. Well, the way that I like to think about that is that the small t truth leads to the big T truth. You know, Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So simply by focusing on the truth, we are doing God's work. We're heeding God's will by focusing on the truth. And even if you can't admit the truth to anyone else, at the very least, admit it to yourself. My 5th point is don't engage in fighting withdrawals. When your position is disproved, when you have said, X will falsify my position, and someone demonstrates X, then instead of trying to change the subject or retreat or redefine terms or deny what you said previously, admit that you're wrong. There's no shame in it. There is shame in trying to retreat and run away and redefine. That's where the shame is. That's where the dishonesty is. When I'm wrong about something, I have no problem admitting it. In fact, this is what's kind of interesting. I get accused of being arrogant a lot. And that's probably fair. I am. But what I also get accused of a lot is never admitting that I'm wrong. And this is very amusing to my fans and my readers who have been around for a long time, because one of the things that they've commented on is that I immediately admit when I'm wrong. In fact, I do so quickly and drop my erroneous position so quickly that people sometimes miss it. I mean, I used to be a devout free trader. I've since published what is possibly the most devastating demolition of free trade that anyone has produced, possibly including Ian Fletcher. And Ian Fletcher did a really good job of thoroughly demolishing Comparative Advantage and David Ricardo. You know, I not only admitted I was wrong, I completely switched sides. And so I don't even understand how it's possible for people to say that. So maybe that's one problem of being readily willing to admit that you're wrong. If you recall, even in the debate, I offered the possibility several times saying, you know, I'm not sure this is relevant, but we will see. My sixth point, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, is if you don't understand simple concepts like an average or simple logical constructions like the transitive property of equality, then don't argue with people. Okay? You're really not ready for it. You're really not capable of it. It's downright, it's not just embarrassing to you. It's a waste of time for everyone else, and it's really irritating for everyone else when you can't understand something as simple as an average rate. You know, I was very frustrated when I was talking to some biologists, and it wasn't that they couldn't answer the question. I know why they couldn't answer the question. It's because we don't have enough information to answer the question. But when they're saying things like, well, what does it matter what the average rate of speciation is? What does it matter what the average rate of fixation is? Well, it matters very greatly because that rate has to exist. And in fact, this is kind of interesting as an aside. One of the readers on the blog looked up the information that was related to the analysis of the Denisovan Neanderthal genome. And when they applied the results from these studies to the model that I was suggesting, it resulted in, at best, the need to push back the chimpanzee human / Neanderthal / Denisovan last common ancestor to at least 36 million years. And here's where it gets really interesting. On the basis of what the scientists who wrote the paper were claiming, it would require us to push that event back to 630 million years. So this doesn't prove anything, but what this does do is it does indicate that the model, the hypothesis that I've suggested, is a potentially relevant one. So again, you need to understand some of these basic concepts before you start arguing things. And if you don't understand a concept that is necessary to the argument, retreat, back out, admit that you don't know. People will not denigrate you for that. They'll respect you for that a lot more than if you insist on arguing in ignorance. That's what makes people think you're stupid, is when you're saying the equivalent of, I think that 2 + 5 is 37, and I think that if you subtract 4 from 10, the answer is purple. When you start babbling like that, no one's going to pay any attention to you, and they won't take you seriously. And they will probably think that you're even less intelligent than you actually are. Once it is clear that you're in over your head, admit it and stop arguing. Focus on asking questions and learning whatever it is you can. When I'm talking to somebody who's an expert in an area that I don't know anything about, I just ask them questions. I don't try to prove to them that I'm a smart boy. I don't try to start arguing with them about something trivial. I just ask them questions and let them talk and try to learn from them. I don't know is one of the most useful things that you can ever say. Here's another point. The actual math is far less important than understanding the way that the math connects to the underlying logic. One of the things I want to make clear is that I'm not particularly good at math. I have very good, math SATs, or I did, a long time ago, but I don't like doing math. My son is a serious mathematician. I can't make heads or tails of any of the stuff he's done for the past 4 or 5 years. But the interesting thing is that it's much more important to understand how the math is going to be used and connected to the model than it is to understand the math itself. I don't really care about whether a Gaussian distribution or some other distribution, none of which I think I could actually tell you what any of them are. It doesn't, I don't need to know how to do it, how to calculate it, to know when it's relevant to use it or not. And so it's actually more important to understand the way the math connects to the logic than it is to understand the math itself. You need to understand what the numbers represent and how they connect to the logic. The two most important questions are how and why. Be very suspicious of anyone who tries to avoid those questions. It's fine to say, you know what, we don't know how. Or, you know what, we don't know why. But to avoid those questions means that there's probably something hinky going on. Always focus on trying to understand the core underlying issue or assumption, whether it's a hypothesis, a theory, a book, an article. Try to understand what the underlying issue is, what the real issue is, what the person is actually talking about. This is something that, for example, in that debate with JF, he completely failed to do. That's why he's been flailing around trying to claim that he wipes the floor and all this kind of nonsense. He never understood what the point of the topic was. He never stepped back and said, okay, why is this person saying this? What are they saying? And if you cannot describe to someone else what that underlying assumption is, you don't understand it. If you cannot articulate something, you don't understand it. Speak Truth says, how and why are beaten out of children in school? Yeah, I mean, the most natural thing in the world is for a child to ask why. It can be maddening when you're a parent. Why? But those are the most natural questions in the world. And it's okay to say, I don't know, but it's not okay to try to shut down the questioning. Read as deeply as you reasonably can into the subject. Start with the popularizers, but go into the original sources as soon as you have a solid grasp on what the popularizers have said. So if you want to understand about evolution, start with the popularizers like Richard Dawkins. But then you need to move on to E.O. Wilson, you need to move on to Haldane, and the more serious writers. Let's see here. Break down any argument you don't understand into its base syllogisms. This will usually reveal if the problem is with you, with bad logic, or with a bad underlying assumption. Read an article. This is a very important one. Okay. Read an article or a section of a book once. Do not comment on it or reach any conclusions about it. Just mentally note or write down what you suspect to be problem areas. Read it a second time to see if you missed anything. Then read the problem areas that you noted. If you think you have detected something wrong, then read that section a fourth time to confirm the error and write down what the error was. Only then should you make any comment on it. That will eliminate almost all the stupid mistakes that people tend to make. That's why I make so few mistakes that people are able to call me on. Because I don't just go, oh, I think I saw an error. Attack. You know, when I write a book like The Irrational Atheist, when I write a book like Jordanetics, by the time I am ready to start writing it, I know the source material forwards, backwards. I know it cold. You know, I can tell you an awful lot about not only the 12 rules for life, but also maps of meaning, because I actually read the stuff before I have anything to say specifically about it. When in doubt, ask a question. Don't argue. I think you might be wrong, so I'm going to argue is an incredibly stupid thing to do. When smart people have doubts about things, they ask questions. The questions clarify their doubts and allows them to determine whether the person is wrong or whether they suspected something incorrectly. Never just dive in. Okay, never opine in ignorance. If you don't know, keep your mouth shut. Always affect to know less than you do, especially when dealing with a subject matter expert. It was kind of funny. There's actually a thing on some evolutionary site saying, don't be fooled by Vox. He'll readily admit that he's not a biologist, but he's better read on the subject than you think, which is kind of true. The best way to undermine a subject matter expert is to ask him relevant questions. Many experts rely on their credentials and don't really know very much. They will reveal their relative ignorance by being unable to answer questions they should be able to answer. This applies to everything. I'm not just talking about scientists and academics. I'm talking about real estate agents. I'm talking about economists. I'm talking about everybody. I mean, one of the reasons why I have so little respect for experts is because so many times they can't answer the most basic questions. Don't talk about fallacies unless you can correctly identify the logical fallacy committed. Fallacy isn't just about being wrong. I mean, there is a sense of the word that does mean that, but the reason that people rely on it and say, oh, that's a fallacy, is because they're intrinsically implying that you are committing what was a trick or a deceit. The etymology of the word is based on the idea of a trick or a deceit. And so unless you're talking about a specific logical fallacy like, you know, an argumentum ad hominem, an appeal to authority, the excluded middle, whatever, don't talk about fallacies. You talk about your assumption is incorrect or your logic went wrong here, etc. But don't call it a fallacy, and don't talk about fallacies unless you can specifically identify it. Don't think you're fooling anyone ever. You're not. People will see through you. Glibness is not a reliable sign of intelligence or correctness. And finally, never respond with automatic negatives. Any halfway intelligent person can use that tendency to respond with negatives, and they can very, very easily use it to make you look ridiculous. You know, I always think it's funny when somebody is being stupid and just, you know, resorting to ridiculous denials, is that you just start asking them simpler and simpler and simpler things, and they start denying more and more obvious things, and that's a good way to rhetorically undermine them. Anyhow, I hope this stream was informative. I hope it was useful. I think if you apply these basic rules, that you will find that from a practical sense, you will improve your functional intelligence. People will have a better impression of your cognitive capacity, and they will also be more likely to take your opinions seriously. It's not important to get your opinion out first. It's not important to always be voicing your opinion. It's more important to learn how to form an opinion that is based on truth, based on sound logic, and at least has a reasonable chance of being correct. So